A man doesn't look for betrayal. It sneaks up on him, like rust under the hood. By the time you notice, the damage is already done. My name is Wade Chandler. I'm 58 years old, and I've spent most of those years under the hoods of cars, fixing what other folks couldn't. I own Chandler's Auto Repair here in Bakers Creek, Texas. Been running it for over 30 years. My old man taught me how to work with my hands, how to take pride in fixing things right. That's how I was raised. Hard work, loyalty, no cutting corners. I built this shop with my own two hands, watching kids I trained turn into men who knew what an honest day's work looked like. My wife, Diane, used to be part of that life. Used to bring me lunch at the garage, sit on the workbench swinging her legs, talking about dreams we had for the future. That was a long time ago. The first sign came like a misfire, subtle, barely noticeable, but enough to make me listen closer. I found a receipt in her purse while looking for a pen. Clayton Steakhouse, a place I hadn't stepped foot in for years. 2 meals, $160. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe a client dinner. Maybe she was out with a friend. But something about it didn't sit right. I put the receipt back, let it rattle around in my head. Then came the little things. She started dressing different, taking longer to get ready for meetings. Her phone, once left on the kitchen counter without a care, now stayed face down, tucked in her purse. A few nights, she came home smelling like a cologne that wasn't mine. I didn't say anything. A man doesn't ask questions unless he's ready for the answers. One night, I was at the shop late, finishing up a rebuild on an old '69 Camaro. My buddy Frank Dawson stopped by. He's a big guy, spent 20 years in the Army before coming back to town. Runs security now. We served together once, back when we were young and full of fire. Now we were just older, but some things never change, like how he could tell when something was eating me up. "You look like hell," Frank said, leaning against the tool chest, arms crossed. "Something wrong?" I wiped my hands on a rag, staring at the engine instead of him. Probably nothing. Frank wasn't the kind of man you could lie to. He gave me a look, waiting. I exhaled. "I think Diane's stepping out." He was quiet for a moment. "You sure?" "Not yet." He nodded, thinking. "You want me to find out?" I looked at him then. Frank wasn't the type to run his mouth or jump to conclusions. If he was offering, it meant he'd do it right. I didn't have to say yes. I could have kept ignoring it, pretending things were fine. But I wasn't that kind of man. "Yeah," I said. "I do." A few days later, Frank came back with the truth, and it was worse than I expected. It wasn't just that she was seeing someone. It was who she was seeing. "Greg Lawson," Frank said, tossing a folder onto my workbench. "That slimy bastard." I flipped through the photos, grainy shots of Diane and Greg at restaurants, in his car, outside a motel on the edge of town. The kind of thing that burns slow in your gut. I should have been angry, but all I felt was cold. "He's not just screwing her," Frank went on. "She's feeding him information about you." I looked up. "What kind of information?" "Financials. The shop. Your schedule. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if she handed over your damn tax returns." That part hit different. Cheating was one thing. Selling me out was another. I closed the folder. "All right." Frank watched me. "All right. I'm not going to lose my temper. Not going to do anything stupid." I met his eyes. "But I'm going to make them regret it." He nodded, satisfied. "Good." I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed beside her, listening to her breathing, thinking about every time she kissed me goodbye while running off to be with him. I thought about the years I spent building this life with her, the sacrifices, the loyalty. And I thought about how all that loyalty had been wasted. The next morning, I kissed her cheek before she left for work. She smiled like nothing was wrong. That was the moment I decided she wasn't going to see me coming. I watched her drive off, the same way she had for years. Except now, I saw her differently. Not as the woman I built a life with, but as someone I didn't really know at all. I walked back inside, poured myself a black coffee, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wood grain like it had the answers. There was a time I would have confronted her right then and there, demanded the truth, let the anger take over. But anger's like gasoline, burns fast, burns hot, and leaves nothing but a mess. I wasn't going to give her or Greg the satisfaction of watching me lose control. Instead, I went to work like it was any other day. The guys at the shop didn't notice anything different, and I kept it that way. Pulled a transmission on an F-150, patched up a kid's beat-up Civic, changed the oil on a '67 Mustang that had seen better days. Work kept my hands busy, but my mind was running on overdrive. By lunch, I had a plan. I started small. Nothing obvious. I left a note on her vanity mirror. You sure about this? Just vague enough to get under her skin. A couple of days later, I moved her phone charger from the bedroom to the living room, just to see if she'd panic when it wasn't where she left it. She did. Then I stopped answering her texts right away, let her sit on the silence. No accusations, no fights. Just a slow shift, like a wrench turning the right bolt, applying just enough pressure to make something snap. A week later, I went by Greg Lawson's real estate office. I didn't walk in, just sat in my truck across the street, watching. He came out after a while, laughing with a couple of his clients, shaking hands like he was some kind of big shot. Slick hair, pressed shirt, the kind of guy who always smelled like expensive aftershave and bullshit. I knew his type. Knew how they thought they could take whatever they wanted without consequences. I made a call to an old buddy who worked in finance, asked him to do some digging. Nothing illegal, just checking if there were any cracks in Greg's little empire. Turns out, there were plenty. Shady deals, some bad investments, a few clients who'd been less than happy with his work. I took notes. That night, Diane came home later than usual. She tried to slide in quiet, but I was already in the recliner, TV on, beer in hand. Long day? I asked, not looking at her. She hesitated. Yeah, lot of meetings. That right? I took a sip, watching her from the corner of my eye. She nodded, setting her purse down, avoiding my gaze. Just work stuff. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, real casual, ran into Greg today. That stopped her cold. Greg? Yeah, at the gas station. I scratched my chin. He sure seems busy these days. Always running around town. She tried to play it cool, but I saw the tension in her shoulders, the way she shifted on her feet. Yeah, I guess so. I didn't say anything else. Just let her sit in it. A few nights later, I started the next step. I left the house at odd hours, made sure she noticed. Came home late without saying where I'd been. One night, I left a burner phone out on the kitchen counter, brand new. No number saved, just to see if she'd check it. She did. The next morning, it was moved half an inch from where I left it. Frank called me the next day. You ready to make a move? Not yet, I said. I'm letting her dig her own grave. You sure about that? Trust me, I said. She's already looking over her shoulder. She just doesn't know why yet. And I was just getting started. Diane was unraveling, and I could see it. The way she jumped when her phone buzzed, the way she glanced over her shoulder when she thought I wasn't looking. She started sleeping lighter, rolling over every time I shifted in bed. The paranoia was settling in, and I wasn't even halfway done. I kept up the pressure in small ways. One night, I pulled into the driveway 5 minutes after she did, just to see how she reacted. I watched from the truck as she sat in the driver's seat, fingers gripping the steering wheel, her breathing uneven. She stayed like that for a full minute before stepping out, checking the street like she expected someone to be watching. I walked inside without a word. Frank came by the shop the next day, arms crossed, face unreadable. She's feeling it, he said. I nodded. Not enough yet. You sure? He leaned against the workbench. I get playing the long game, but at some point, you gotta drop the hammer. I wiped my hands on a rag, thinking, she ain't confessed yet, and she hasn't left. That means she still thinks she's in control. Frank exhaled, rubbing his jaw. Yeah, well, people do dumb things when they're cornered. Just don't let this turn into a damn soap opera. I smirked. You ever know me to do drama? He grunted. No, but I've seen you throw a wrench through a wall. Fair point. That night, I took it a step further. When Diane came home, I was already in the kitchen, sipping a whiskey, phone in my hand. I let her see me put it down slow, like I had something to hide. She hesitated at the doorway. Who was that? She asked, too casual. I shrugged. Old friend. She tried to brush past it, but I saw the gears turning in her head. That night, she checked my phone when she thought I was asleep. Joke was on her. I left it open on a blank note just to mess with her. She barely slept after that. A few days later, I planted the final seed. I let a little rumor slip at the diner, nothing obvious, just a well-placed comment about Greg having a lot of meetings with a certain married woman. I made sure the right ears caught it. Small towns have a way of spreading news like wildfire. By the end of the week, Greg was getting twitchy. I heard from my guy in finance that his deals were going sideways, clients backing out. Not only that, but I had an old customer of mine, a guy who'd been burned by Greg on a bad property sale, call him up, asking a few pointed questions about his business ethics. Greg was feeling the walls close in, and Diane was stuck right in the middle of it. She broke 2 nights later. Came home late, eyes rimmed red, pacing before she finally spoke. "Wade," she started, voice tight. Have you been saying things about me?" I looked up from the newspaper. "Like what?" She shifted on her feet. "People are talking. People talk all the time." Her jaw clenched. "I mean about me and Greg." I folded the paper slow, set it on the table. "Something you want to tell me, Diane?" Her mouth opened, then shut. She looked away. I let the silence stretch. "No." I leaned back in my chair. "Then I guess I don't know what you're worried about." She exhaled sharp. "Damn it, Wade." I just stared at her, and for the first time in months, she couldn't hold my gaze. That was when I knew. She was cracking, and she knew it. But she wasn't ready to admit it yet. That was fine. I could wait. The next morning, she barely spoke to me. She moved around the kitchen like a ghost, tense, distracted, lost in whatever storm was brewing inside her head. I sipped my coffee slow, watching. She was unraveling, and she knew it. "Got a long day ahead?" I asked, voice even. She glanced up, eyes wary. "Meetings," she said. I nodded, taking another sip. "Busy woman." Her fingers twitched around her coffee mug. She didn't like the way I said that. She left without another word, and I let her go, knowing damn well where she was headed. I had no doubts now. I wasn't wondering if she was cheating. I was watching it unfold in real time. And I was almost done playing the patient man. By noon, I got the call I was waiting for. Frank's voice came through the line, steady and dry as always. "You're gonna like this." "Hit me." "Lawson's in trouble. Turns out, one of his clients is suing him over some shady land deal. It's making the rounds. Bad for business." I let that sink in, a slow satisfaction settling in my gut. "That's so." "Yeah. And he's jumpy. Been making calls, trying to patch things up. But here's the fun part. He's worried about Diane." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Means he's worried she's gonna be a liability. Word is, he told a buddy that if she starts cracking, he's cutting her loose." I sat with that for a moment, staring at the wall. It was almost too good. She wrecked our marriage for this guy, and now he was ready to drop her the second things got tough. I smirked. Well, looks like she bet on the wrong horse." Frank chuckled. "Guess so. What's your next move?" I drummed my fingers against the table, thinking. Time to take the gloves off. That night, I set the trap. I stayed late at the shop, made sure Diane thought I was still working. Then I drove across town and parked down the street from Greg's office, watching. Sure enough, 15 minutes later, her car pulled up. She didn't go inside, probably too paranoid, but she waited, checking her phone every few minutes. Greg finally came out, leaned into her window, talking low and fast. He was agitated. She looked scared. I took a picture. Just one. Good enough angle, good enough proof. Then I left, making sure she didn't see me. When I got home, she was already there, sitting on the couch, pretending to read something on her phone. I closed the door, locked it slow, and pocketed my keys. "Good night," I asked, voice neutral. She looked up, startled. "Yeah, just tired." I nodded, stepping closer. "That right? Long meetings and all." She swallowed. "Yeah." I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the picture, and set it on the coffee table in front of her. She stared at it. Didn't move. "Anything you want to tell me, Diane?" Silence. I let it sit between us, thick and heavy like grease in an old engine. Finally, she exhaled, her shoulders slumping. "Wade." I held up a hand. "Don't. Whatever excuse you got, I don't need to hear it. I already know." She blinked fast, hands trembling. It wasn't supposed to." I laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Yeah? What was it supposed to be then?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Lot of things I could say right now. Lot of things I could do. But I'll tell you what I won't do. I won't beg. I won't ask why. And I sure as hell won't sit here and act like I didn't see this coming. Her face crumpled, but I didn't care. I wasn't playing this game anymore. "You want to be with him?" I asked, voice even. "Go ahead. But don't think for a second he's going to take care of you. He's already looking for the exit." Her breath hitched. "What?" I smirked, shaking my head. "He's scared, Diane. Scared of losing his money, his business. And you? You're just one more problem he don't need." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't soften. "You made your choice," I said, grabbing my jacket. "Now you get to live with it." And with that, I walked out, leaving her sitting there, staring at the mess she made. I spent the night at Frank's. He didn't ask questions, just tossed me a beer and pointed at the recliner. That's the thing about real friends. You don't need to explain every damn thing. He knew. I knew. That was enough. Morning came early, and with it, a sense of finality. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Just done. I left before the sun was fully up, drove back to the house, and stepped inside like it was just another day. Diane was in the kitchen, still in her robe, staring at a cup of coffee like it held the answer to all her problems. She looked up when I walked in, eyes bloodshot, face pale. "You didn't come home," she said. I tossed my keys on the table, took my time pouring a cup of coffee. "Nope." She swallowed hard. "Where were you?" I took a sip, let the silence stretch. Then I shrugged. "Does it matter?" Her lip trembled. "Wade, I set my cup down hard enough to make her jump. "Stop. Just stop." I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. "I don't need the excuses. I don't need the tears. I don't need any of it." I pointed to the living room. "You made a choice. Now I'm making mine." Her face crumpled. I was lost. I didn't. Didn't what? I snapped. Didn't mean to screw him? Didn't mean to lie to my face every damn day? I let out a bitter laugh. "You weren't lost, Diane. You were just selfish." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but I didn't care. Not my problem anymore. I grabbed my jacket and nodded toward the bedroom. "I'll be out by the end of the week. You can keep the house." She looked up, stunned. "What?" I smirked. "Oh, don't get me wrong. I could fight for it. Hell, I could bury you in court if I wanted to." I took another sip of coffee. "But I don't want this place. Not anymore. It stopped being home the second you let him in." She covered her mouth with her hand, shaking her head. "Wade, please. Save it," I said, grabbing my keys. "I already wasted enough years on you." I walked out and didn't look back. The garage felt different that day. Same smell of grease and metal, same sounds of impact wrenches and engines turning over, but something had shifted. Maybe it was me. Maybe I was just finally seeing things clear for the first time in a long time. Mikey, one of the younger guys I was training, gave me a long look when I walked in. "Boss, you good?" I rolled my shoulders, nodding. "Better than I've been in a while." He grinned. "Good. 'Cause we got a transmission that's being a real pain in the ass." I smirked, grabbing my tools. "Then let's teach it some manners." And just like that, I got back to work. By noon, the whole damn town knew. That's the thing about a place like Baker's Creek. Secrets don't stay secret long. I was eating my lunch in the office when Frank strolled in, tossing a newspaper on my desk. "Page 4, he said, smirking. I raised a brow but flipped to the page. And there it was, Greg Lawson's company facing multiple lawsuits for shady business practices. Apparently, a few of his clients weren't too happy with the way he handled their money. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. I leaned back, smirking. Well, Frank chuckled. "Karma moves quick." I folded the paper, tossing it aside. Or maybe I just gave it a little push. Frank shook his head, amused. "You're cold, man." I shrugged. "Nah, just done being the fool." We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the distant hum of the shop outside. Then Frank sighed, rubbing his jaw. "You know she's falling apart, right?" I didn't ask who he meant. "Yeah, her parents ain't speaking to her. Friends turned their backs. She's got nothing left but him." He snorted. "And he ain't gonna stick around much longer." I nodded, not feeling a damn thing about it. Not my problem. Frank studied me, then grinned. "You really are done." I picked up my coffee, taking a slow sip. Damn right I am. A week later, I was packed. Clothes, tools, a few personal things I actually gave a damn about. The rest? Left it for her. I didn't need much. Never did. The house, the furniture, all of it felt like dead weight now. Just things attached to a life that wasn't mine anymore. I was loading the last of my gear into the truck when I heard her footsteps behind me. Slow, hesitant. "You're really leaving," Diane said, voice small. I didn't turn around. Just tightened the ratchet strap on my toolbox. "Told you I would." She exhaled hard, like she'd been hoping I was bluffing. "Where are you going?" I shrugged. "Don't know yet. Got options." She stepped closer, just enough for me to hear the catch in her breath. I made a mistake." I finally turned, met her eyes. "Yeah, you did." She swallowed. "I miss you." I let that hang in the air, let her feel how little it meant to me now. "You miss what I gave you," I said. "You miss the comfort, the security, the fact that you never had to wonder if I had your back." I tilted my head. "You don't miss me. You miss what I was to you." Tears welled up, but I didn't feel a damn thing about it. "You chose him," I said simply. You picked a man who would drop you the second things got rough. She flinched. I nodded. Yeah, I know. I know he's bailing on you. I know his business is sinking. And I know you're standing here hoping I'll be the same dumb bastard who always took care of everything. Wait. No. I held up a hand. You don't get to say my name like it still means something to you. She wiped her face, shoulders shaking. I never meant to hurt you. I huffed a laugh, shaking my head. You knew exactly what you were doing. You just didn't think you'd get caught. She looked down, defeated. I climbed into the truck, slammed the door shut, and fired up the engine. For a second, she looked like she wanted to say something else, but I was done listening. I put the truck in gear and drove off without another word. I stayed in town just long enough to tie up loose ends. The divorce was quick, clean. No drawn-out fights. She didn't have the energy to contest anything. Maybe she thought I'd change my mind, that I'd come around. But I never looked back. Greg's business collapsed within a month. The lawsuits piled up, the clients vanished, and by the time it was over, he was drowning in debt. Last I heard, he skipped town, left Diane in the wreckage. Fitting. As for me, I took a cabin out by Lake Travis. Quiet place, just enough space for a workshop. Set up my tools, started taking restoration jobs for classic cars. The kind of work I actually enjoyed. Frank came by one weekend, a case of beer in hand. He whistled as he stepped inside. Damn, you really went full mountain man. I smirked, cracking open a bottle. Just keeping things simple. He took a seat, watching me work. No regrets. I tightened a bolt under the hood of an old Chevy, wiped my hands on a rag, and exhaled. Not a damn one. The days blurred into a steady rhythm. Wake up early, coffee on the porch, hands in an engine by noon. No drama, no lies, no looking over my shoulder. Just the sound of wrenches turning, the smell of grease and old leather, the satisfaction of fixing something real. Out here, things made sense. Metal either worked or it didn't. No pretending, no excuses. You stripped out the bad parts, replaced them with something better, and moved on. Frank dropped by every now and then, usually bringing beer and some news from town. Diane's still around, he said one evening, cracking open a bottle. I didn't look up from the carburetor I was rebuilding. That's so. He took a long sip, stretching his legs. Yeah, she's not doing great. Moved into some cheap rental outside of town. Works at the bank now, filing papers for people who probably heard about her mess. He shook his head. Ain't the queen bee no more, that's for sure. I nodded, not feeling much of anything about it. She made her bed. She did. Frank watched me for a beat, then smirked. Greg, though? That bastard's in Florida. I raised a brow. Florida. Frank grinned. Yep. Got caught in some bad business deals, packed up in the middle of the night, and ran. Word is, he pissed off the wrong folks. I chuckled, shaking my head. Figures. Frank exhaled, rolling the bottle between his hands. So that's it, huh? Into the road. I looked out over the lake, the sky turning that deep orange before dusk. Nah, I said finally. Road's still going. I'm just done dragging deadweight. Frank nodded, satisfied. Damn right. A few months later, I got a call from Diane's number. I let it ring. Then I deleted it. She had nothing left to say that I cared to hear. A man can waste a lot of years holding on to something that's already gone. I used to think commitment meant sticking it out no matter what. That if you just worked hard enough, gave enough, forgave enough, you could fix anything. But not everything's worth fixing. Some things are just too far gone, too rusted out, too full of rot to ever run right again. So you strip them down, take what's still good, and scrap the rest. And you don't look back.